The Venezuelans outside Venezuela. But 30, 60, 180 days from now, well, they'll still be delighted. You know that in any country, in any government, there's always going to be issues. The rain's going to stop. Not going to start soon enough, and the water behind the dam.
No musiałem się zatankować, bo księgowy się świecił.
Public employees will get the money they think they deserve, or people who think the government owes them money are not going to get paid. Having the least respected politician in Venezuela as the president of the country is a terrible formula. Maria Corina Machado is the most respected. Delcy Rodriguez is the least respected. I don't know that President Trump understands that it's not just Maria Corina Machado who needs the support of Trump, it's that he needs her support as well.
But does she have the support of those various parts of the security apparatus in the country that she would need to? I thought it was really interesting, actually, what you were saying there about the calculation between stability and democracy. And it is a difficult and delicate calculation to make, but realistically, could Maria Corina Machado take charge right now? She hasn't got those key organs of the state as it exists now behind her.
The idea that overnight the police and the military are simply going to switch loyalty is obviously not going to happen. What really needs to happen in Venezuela is what President Trump and the America First people are saying they don't want, and that is nation building. The electoral council needs to be rebuilt. The entire court system needs to be rebuilt. Every teacher who's been hired in the past 25 years was hired on the basis of loyalty to Chavez and then Maduro. There's got to be training, transition, and it is going to be difficult, and clearly they're going to make mistakes.
Charles, I asked Freddie this. Now, I'm interested to get your take on it as well. How much do you think the US priority is bringing democracy to Venezuela? And how much do you think the US priority is about the oil?
Well, Freddie has to be polite. I don't. Since I have the advantage of being retired. Look, Carolyn Levitt undermined everything today when she said, hopefully there will be elections. Hopefully there will be elections. In American English, that means, well, maybe not, that it's not their priority. I don't hear President Trump talking about democracy in Venezuela. And I think that's going to be a big error in the long run.
Charles Shapiro and Freddie Guevara, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And that brings us to 3 minutes to 8, and to any questions, which happens tonight, of course, because it is Friday, and here on the line is Alex Forsyth. Morning, Alex.
Good morning, Justin. Tonight we are in Marsden, a village in West Yorkshire, not far from Huddersfield. And there we will find out what people make of this week's developments, from defections to diplomacy and everything in between. Joining me on the panel, we have the Labour MP and Chair of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry, the Conservative peer and former Vote Leave Chief Executive Matthew Elliott, the Deputy Leader of the Green Party of England and Wales, Mothin Ali, and the Chair of UK Hospitality, Kate Nichols. We will be live at 8 p.m. I hope you can join us.
Thank you, Alex. To the weather now, which Helen Willits is watching. Morning again, Helen.
Good morning, Anna. As we head towards the weekend, just a quick look ahead as well, it looks like we'll keep low pressure in charge across the UK. So there'll be some showers, not a washout, quite usable weather at times, but probably quite a bit of cloud. And particularly on Sunday, a little bit more rain around, and some chilly nights, which we've had, of course, overnight last night. Widespread frost in Scotland, but let's start in England and Wales, where it's been a little bit milder, but foggy. Now that Met Office warning runs out in about an hour's time. That's primarily for the northeast of England, Yorkshire in particular, and down towards Lincolnshire, Humber area too. But we've got this band of showers moving their way eastwards into the area now, moving out of northwest England soon. They're quite heavy, sharp bursts of showers, and following on behind, the showers will certainly be lively with some rumbles of thunder to accompany them. They will be primarily for western parts of England and Wales once this early band of showers moves away from East Anglia and northeast England around about lunchtime. It should be largely dry and bright, and it's relatively mild at 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. The wind direction is the reason for that, and it will be quite a brisk wind blowing around the Irish sea coast as well with those heavy showers. Northern Ireland also have had a chilly start, a little bit of fog around here and a few showers. And that's really the name of the game today. Sunny spells and scattered showers. Shower most likely to be in eastern areas, Antrim and down. Temperatures getting up to around about 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. Now to Scotland, it's been a frosty start here, but that band of showery rain is edging through the western side of the central belt now. It's moving across Dumfries and Galloway into the western Highland region, and it will fall as snow over the hills, and it'll replace the sunshine that we have further north and east. But behind it, the sunshine returns. Scattered heavy thundery showers this afternoon, temperatures 2 to 8.
Thank you for that. You are listening to Today on Radio 4 with Anna Foster and Justin Webb.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Friday the 16th of January. The headlines this morning: Robert Jenrick has urged Tory supporters to join him in Reform UK, a day after he was sacked by the Conservatives. What does it all mean for the political right in Britain? We'll discuss that with Michael Gove, no stranger to internal Tory rivalry. Venezuela's opposition leader has given her Nobel Peace Prize medal to Donald Trump. And the former president of South Korea has been jailed for 5 years for his failed attempt to impose martial law.
Also in the next hour, the author of the best-selling memoir H is for Hawk on its move to the big screen. And if you remember these children's TV classics...
Postman Pat, Postman Pat, Postman.
Exhibition celebrating the golden age of British animation. First, though, the BBC News read by Jane Steele.
Robert Jenrick, who joined Reform UK yesterday after being sacked from the Shadow Cabinet, has urged Conservative supporters to follow him and switch to Nigel Farage's party. Writing in the Daily Telegraph, Mr Jenrick claims the future of the country is on the line. Here's our political correspondent, Damien Grammaticus.
Robert Jenrick is the most high-profile former Conservative yet to join Reform UK. The Telegraph, the paper of choice for many Tories, gives him space to expound his view that the Conservative Party is broken and can't be fixed. So Mr Jenrick exhorts its readers, join the movement that is Reform UK. Yesterday, Nigel Farage sat grinning broadly as Mr Jenrick excoriated his former Conservative colleagues. Kemi Badenoch said she had been right to sack him as he'd lied and was motivated only by personal ambition. Environment Secretary Steve Reed said it was farcical that Mr Jenrick, in accusing the Conservatives of breaking Britain, had read out a long list of his own failures while he was a member of the Cabinet. The danger for Reform UK is that it risks becoming seen as a home for former Conservatives, not a party offering a radical change of direction.
Mr Jenrick's replacement as the Shadow Justice Secretary, Nick Timothy, told us he didn't think anyone looked at Reform UK and thought they were doing the serious work needed to bring about change.
The public are absolutely sick of the backbiting and the backstabbing and, frankly, the lack of seriousness that politicians have shown when the country faces very serious problems, and that did take place at the end of the last Conservative government. It takes place every day with this Labour government. It takes place inside the Reform Party. When Kemi was presented with irrefutable information, she acted very decisively, very bravely.
The Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has given her Nobel Peace Prize medal to President Trump at a meeting at the White House. She said the gift was in recognition of his unique commitment to Venezuela's freedom. Mr. Trump has thanked her on social media, but he has not endorsed Ms. Machado as Venezuela's new leader in the wake of the seizure of the former President Nicolas Maduro by US Special Forces. Our North America editor Sarah Smith sent this report from Washington.
Donald Trump was clearly infuriated when Maria Corina Machado was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in October for her efforts to try to restore democracy to Venezuela. He believes the award should have been his. So as part of her attempt to persuade him to allow free and fair elections in her country, Ms. Machado told reporters she handed the gold medal over to Mr. Trump.
I presented the President of the United States the medal of the Nobel Peace Prize.
He said later that was a wonderful gesture of mutual respect. President Trump has so far showed much more interest in Venezuela's vast oil reserves than he has in reviving democratic elections. He's working closely with Delcy Rodriguez, the former deputy to Nicolas Maduro, who's now the acting president of Venezuela. She's met all of America's demands, including handing over millions of barrels of oil. Maria Corina Machado will need to bide her time until President Trump decides Venezuela is ready for a democratically elected leader.
South Korea's former president Yoon Suk-yeol has been found guilty of charges related to his failed attempt to impose martial law just over a year ago. The court said he had plunged South Korea into political crisis and had shown no remorse. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for abuse of power and obstruction of justice. Our correspondent in Seoul, Jake Kwon, reports.
Yoon Suk-yeol sat motionlessly as the judge read out the verdicts. He said Yoon had turned his back on the constitution he had sworn to protect. The former president had denied the charges, which included declaring martial law in 2024 without consulting his cabinet and ordering the Presidential Guard to prevent his arrest. He is still facing several more trials, including on charges of leading an insurrection, for which prosecutors are seeking the death penalty, though in practice, this is never carried out.
The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has met the Chinese leader Xi Jinping during a visit to Beijing intended to repair years of strained relations between the two countries. From Beijing, our China correspondent Laura Bicker reports.
Mark Carney is travelling the world as part of a sales pitch for Canadian goods, and China is top of his list. He sees this trip as a chance to reset his country's relationship with Beijing and find new economic opportunities in the face of hefty US tariffs. Diplomatic relations between the two nations fell apart in 2018 when Canada arrested a Chinese business executive wanted in the US. China retaliated and detained 2 Canadian citizens, keeping them in harsh conditions. As the two leaders shook hands in the Great Hall of the People, President Xi described it as a turnaround of ties. For Beijing, this visit is an opportunity to get closer to a neighbour and key partner of the US.
The public spending watchdog, the National Audit Office, says the target made for rebuilding hospitals affected by unsafe concrete will be missed. 7 hospitals in England were constructed using reinforced autoclaved areas in concrete or RAC, which is prone to crumbling. It's South of the UK.
Labour rewrote Boris Johnson's plan to build 40 hospitals. The NAO said this was more realistic, though it noted the final projects won't be completed till 2045. 7 hospitals built mainly with suspect RAC concrete, some needing steel and wooden post buildings have been. The NAO says they won't be replaced by the 2030 deadline. It'll be 2 years later, though the report says this is still a tight schedule. NHS providers representing trusts said the delays risked normalising unacceptable conditions for patients and staff. The Department of Health said the report showed the programme was on a stable long-term footing, though it disputed the NAO's suggestion that costs have more than doubled.
South East Water says supplies have been restored to 6,500 properties in Tunbridge Wells in Kent. The company has apologised for the disruption which began last weekend. The regulator Ofwat is investigating the firm for what it says are repeated outages since November. A report by MPs has found that hundreds of vulnerable children in England are regularly put at risk in a care system that places them in unregistered homes. The Department for Education said it would give Ofsted more powers to tackle illegal providers and would boost the number of foster homes. Here's our Social Affairs editor Alison Holt.
The Public Accounts Committee found that in September 2024, nearly 800 children in the care system were placed in illegal homes. Its report says at that point in time, this represented 1 in every 10 children in residential care. The homes weren't registered with the children's care watchdog Ofsted, so hadn't been fully checked for quality and safety. It also found rather than being short-term emergency placements, the children stayed for an average of 6 months. Many were placed miles from their family homes because of the shortage of suitable places in some parts of the country. The report also criticises the high profits made by some of the largest private providers of children's social care.
The Spanish singer Julio Iglesias denied allegations of sexual abuse made against him by 2 women who previously worked for him. Writing on social media, the 82-year-old said the accusations were absolutely false and he had never abused any woman. The abuse is said to have taken place in 2021 at his mansion in the Dominican Republic. Scientists have developed a new map of the landscape beneath the ice of Antarctica, revealing thousands of previously undiscovered hills and ridges. They hope the research, published in the academic journal Science, will improve understanding of how the continent might respond to climate change. The study's lead author is Helen Ockenden.
Having that high resolution of all those lumps and bumps can really affect how the ice is moving. So it's really important to know this everywhere so that those models of how sea level is going to change in the future can be more accurate, and that really helps policymakers and governments to make decisions about, do we need to build a 10-metre or a 20-metre seawall? When do we need to do it?
The artwork and puppets that brought to life Danger Mouse, Jamie and the Magic Torch and Noddy are going on permanent display for the first time. The Cosgrove Hall Films Archive in Sale in Greater Manchester will showcase the work of the animation studio 15 years after it shut. It's our North of England reporter Rowan Bridge.
Danger Mouse was the most well-known character created by Cosgrove Hall Films, the Manchester animation studio. Over more than 30 years, it made series that became loved by millions, from Jamie and the Magic Torch in the 70s through to Postman Pat and Bill and Ben in the 2000s. Among those to work there were Bernard Sumner and John Squire of the Manchester bands New Order and the Stone Roses. Voices for characters were provided by, amongst others, Sir David Jeason and Terry Scott of the sitcom Terry and June.
Rowan Bridge reporting.
Thank you. It is 8:10. What has just happened? The bold facts are that a very senior member of the Conservative Party, an energetic campaigner as Shadow Justice Secretary, was involved in a messy defection to reform. A speech he was going to make announcing his reasons was shown to his party leader, Kemi Badenoch. She fired him, chucked him out of the party. Shortly afterwards, he turned up with Nigel Farage. Mr. Jenrick is not just well known, he's also hugely popular among grassroots Conservatives, or it was until yesterday. Lots of the thick of it style drama. Where does it leave the centre-right in British politics? And the two parties, Reform and the Conservatives, that represent the views and aspirations of probably around 40% of voters. In particular, is there now a post-Jenrick space for the Conservatives to occupy? In a moment, Lord Gove, who's here in the studio, will answer some of those questions. First, a quick word from our political editor, Chris Mason, who was already too busy to join us live, but I talked to him a few minutes ago and asked him to set out the picture. Where are we this week?
Firstly, Justin, yesterday was kind of politics at its most raw. Choreography didn't have time to get its boots on. So that shambolic moment at the news conference that I was at tea time yesterday of Mr. Jenrick being late to his own defection, like waiting for a bride and wondering if the shotgun marriage is off. And that was the essence of it, because it had been fast forwarded by that tactical masterstroke from Kemi Badenoch in doing what she did yesterday morning in kicking him out. I think where we are is we've had this flood of Conservatives, most of whom haul around the word former in their biography, former MPs, for instance, like Nadeem Zahawi, the former Chancellor, just the other day defecting. Not Robert Jenrick, and this is why this matters. So contemporary a figure in the Conservative fold. He was at a shadow cabinet meeting the other day. He was at an away day not long before that, taking copious notes, I'm told. And yes, he was this kind of social media generating, headline grabbing, tricky to discipline colleague of Kemi Badenoch. But, and this is the key point, he represents a substantial chunk of thought within the Conservative Party. Now he's left, albeit courtesy of a kick in the what's-its on his way out the door. But he's saying this morning in the Telegraph, that door is open, follow me over to Reform. And there will be Conservatives looking at that, if you like, open door and making exactly that consideration.
And I suppose the point is that not just Conservative MPs that you're talking about, it's Conservative members, it's the people that go and knock on doors and previously have voted for the party.
It is at every level of the, if you like, political hierarchy, heading up to the most important, the voter. So yes, local authority councillors, for instance. Yes, former MPs, former ministers. Yes, in this instance, someone who was in the shadow cabinet this time yesterday morning. But it is, if you like, a giant sign, and the biggest sign yet, and there's been lots of these signs, saying to those of recent Conservative affiliation of whatever order of magnitude, wind is blowing on the right of politics. If you listen to that, this slug, this civil war, if you like, on the right of British politics. Lord Frost, the former Conservative PM, now a not affiliated PM, writing also in the Telegraph this morning about a fight to the death, a street fight to the death. There would only be electoral logic in accommodation, i.e. some sort of deal between the Conservatives and Reform, if both were still competitive in a couple of years. So that's why this really matters. And you have Labour looking on, brief respite from all of their troubles, seeing this on the right and seeing it garnished with the farce of yesterday, as well as the fact that you end up with big questions being asked about what this means for reform and what it means for the Conservatives.
That was Chris Mason, our political editor. Lord Gove, Michael Gove, former cabinet minister, of course, under several Conservative prime ministers. Current editor of The Spectator is here in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just start, would you, by telling us what it must be like to be Robert Jenrick this morning.
Well, I have a deal of personal sympathy with the position that Robert Jenrick finds herself in, for two reasons. One, I worked with Rob. He was my PPS when I was in the Justice Department. I like him personally and find him good company and thoughtful. But there is a cautionary tale, and that cautionary tale comes from my own experience. Irrespective of what I've done in government, many people will remember the most striking moment in my political career as being the moment in 2016, when I decided that I could no longer support Boris Johnson as a potential leader of the Conservative Party. And not only did I withdraw my support, I declared my own candidature. Now, I thought at the time, and would argue to this day, that what I was doing was the right thing, but in the eyes of most people at that time, and a continuing number to this day, it didn't matter what my reasons were. The overall impression, I'm afraid, was of treachery. And so the challenge for Rob is that he will think, and his speech yesterday made that clear, that the Conservative Party was no longer an appropriate vessel for what he believes in, and his speech was well constructed and all the rest of it. But the overall impression that will have been generated is that he was caught mid-plot. This was not a decision that he was master of, and that creates a challenge for him, and it also creates a challenge for reform.
And I suppose in political terms, it's a question of whether you are actually as big a figure as in the moment you think yourself to be when you're making that kind of decision.
Well, it is true that for all politicians, self-knowledge is a rationed commodity. I think for, again, for the country, one of the things that will happen is in Kemi Badenoch's statement, I think, again, 2 points were clear. One is her reference to the psychodrama. I think she's right that one of the things that did for the Tories in the past was the sense of introspection, self-interest, and self-absorption. And I think she was absolutely right to say that a party that aspires to govern seriously needs to rid itself of that. The second thing is strength. The decision to sack Robert in that way will have sent a message to the country of strength. Now, of course, the Conservatives have lost a talent. Their ranks are diminished in numbers. But nevertheless, when people are thinking about leaders, of course they look to policy, but they also look to something both more intangible and more consequential, which is this person a leader? And until, I think, probably October of last year, there were many Tories who felt that Kemi was not living up to her promise. Now, very few people in the Conservative Party are.
Is she safe as leader through to the next election, do you think?
Well, I think Rob's own consideration about defection, which resulted, of course, in him being flushed out, is actually evidence that he thought so. So, if Rob had felt that he had a chance of becoming leader because the local elections or other events would undermine Kemi, then I think he would have stayed. And he would have believed that he had an opportunity to remake the Conservative Party in the direction in which he wished to go. I think that his conclusion was that Kemi was in a stronger position, and I think emphatically following the way in which she handled this, she is. And while, of course, Reform have gained a talent, there is a danger, and there is a danger for Reform, a double danger. Danger one is that after the defection of Nadhim Zahawi earlier this week, there's a risk that rather than seeming like a fresh force determined to clear up politics, they look rather more like Slytherin House. They look rather more like the home of those who are the intriguers. The second thing is that some of the most energetic figures in Reform, people like Leila Cunningham, their candidate for mayor, people like Zia Youssef, have made a distinct point in saying, look, Reform has to present itself not as a home for ex-Tories, but a fresh force. And Zia was very critical of Rob when Rob was in the Conservative Party. And now, even though Nigel Farage, of course, is the prime force, the undoubted leader of Reform, there is also now in Reform what there wasn't before, which is a succession battle. So Nigel is, he's been the leader effectively of this movement in its various incarnations for 20 years. It would have been assumed that Zia was probably his natural successor. Now, there's another, potential pretender to that throne as well.
To what extent do you think, I don't know if you heard Nick Timothy talking to us, so he's the new Justice Secretary, new Conservative Justice Secretary, Shadow Justice Secretary, talking to us earlier on. I asked him what differences he had between himself politically, just from the point of view of Conservative supporters. What is the difference between him and Robert Jenrick? What he suggested was that the difference between Ron Jenrick and the wider difference now between the Conservatives and Reform, and something they're going to be saying again and again now, is that they know how to put into action the changes that both they and Reform want to see. So Reform talk about things, they would actually be able to do that. Is that the right space to be in, or is there a leftier space for the Conservatives to fill now that pushes Reform away into talking about things that the Conservatives don't want to talk about anymore?
I think that Nick Timothy's broad analysis is correct. I think that both the appeal but also the weakness of Reform is that they are, or have presented themselves as being an insurgent force. The appeal, certainly hitherto, has been freshness, but the problem is that their consistency and also their capacity to deliver are in question. And again, to be fair, Nigel Farage himself has said that the biggest question mark about Reform is their capacity to implement the scale and nature of change required. And if you also look just at the sheer mechanics of politics, there are two things. One, the handling of yesterday was, maladroit, to put it mildly, on the part of Rob and Reform, assured on the part of Kemi and the Conservatives. And then the second thing is that when you probe the detail of policy in a variety of areas, then the work that the Conservatives have done is, certainly at the moment, more robust than that which Reform have done. So the challenge for Reform is, yes, they now have ex-ministers. Are those ex-ministers capable of providing the programme of government that enables Reform to be taken seriously?
Well, except that in the conversation, isn't it that they're going to be able to say things that people who roughly would support them want to hear, for instance, about leaving various European institutions, etc., that actually the Conservatives are now going to feel hamstrung about saying because they're going to be appealing to a different electorate?
Well, I think it's the difference between the performative and delivery. And again, I want to be fair. So the onus is on Reform to prove that it can deliver. It, in local government, has had, how can I put this kindly, a mixed record so far. So we were told that there would be a Doge-style Elon Musk purge of public expenditure from Reform councils. What we've actually seen is dysfunction and council tax rates going up. But Reform have an opportunity to demonstrate that they do actually have some of the detailed answers that the country will need for the big changes, which I think Rob Jenrick is actually right, the country needs overall. There is a contrast, I think, with the specificity that Kemi Badenoch and her team have brought to questions like, for example, changing tax, the reform of stamp duty, and also in the sphere of home affairs as well. So I think that is the principal distinction. I think there's another thing as well, which is that there's a mood, a tone, a flavour, and an aroma. Kemi factor is critical because during the first few months of her premiership, people were saying, who is she, what type of leader is she? We now have a clearer view. Feisty, sassy, decisive, and actually fresh. So even though Reform are the new kids on the block, Kemi is the leader who appears to be that gust of air going through the Westminster corridors. things can change in politics, but that's the advantage she has.
Michael Gove, thank you very much.
It's 24 minutes past 8. How can training a stubborn northern goshawk provide some kind of help with the grief of losing a father? It's a question anybody would really have asked before Helen Macdonald published H is for Hawk 12 years ago. The book was showered with literary prizes, and now the screen version is about to open in cinemas a week today. Here's a moment from the film when Helen, played by Claire Foy, first trains the goshawk Mabel, helped by her friend Stuart.
Present the chick.
Yeah?
Yeah, not far. That's perfect.
Mabel. Mabel. Come on, Mabes.
She's distracted, I don't know. Just present a little more of the chick.
Come on, Mabes.
There, she sees it.
Mabel, come on.
Here we go, what's that there? Come on. She's coming. There you go. Take that chick off that.
Amazing. Well done, Mabes. Well done.
Bring her back, we'll go further.
Well, Helen Macdonald is with us this morning, who wrote the book H is for Hawk. It's her story, and Philippa Lothorpe, who's directed that new film, is with us as well. Morning, both.
Hello.
Helen, I always wonder, and as obviously you've seen that scene so many times, you've lived it, and just listening to it there, what does it feel like to see your own story on screen like that?
I spent a while telling everyone that it was completely fine and absolutely normal, and then of course it isn't. It's beautiful to watch this film. You know, part of you sees the film as something entirely itself, and it succeeds on all of its own terms, and it's glorious. But like, yes, when I first visited the set, when it was being filmed, and I saw Claire Foy dressed in my clothes, with, you know, right down to an artfully painted piece of hawk poo on her trousers, walking around my old college with a hawk on her vest, I genuinely I felt so much like a ghost watching myself in the past. I had to kind of grab hold of the brick wall next to me to make sure I wasn't dreaming. It's extraordinary how much they capture that whole experience that I went through.
And it's such a deeply personal story in your case as well. This is about your grief for losing your father, and then the way that training Mabel brings you through that. How do you, I mean, you wrote a book, I mean, this is the whole point, you put it down in writing, but when it comes to somebody actually capturing that, how did Claire do?
I don't know, it's just, I don't know, I mean, I'm speechless. I think, unfortunately, it's not brilliant for a radio, but like, I'm pretty speechless about what she did, you know. There was a wonderful moment when I had a Zoom with her just before she began, the film started to be shot, and you know, I came on and started talking to her, and she asked a few incredibly perceptive, cute questions, and I thought to myself, oh my God, she's just like me. She's exactly like me. And then a little bit later, I realised that in fact she was honing her performance, and in fact it was acting. She has such a lightness. She's able to communicate with no voice at all, no words. The kinds of depths of love and of loss in a way that I just think is utterly magical. And I see myself in her, but I think I've lost anyone. It's that good.
And Philippa, as a director in the world of film, you have so much open to you now in terms of special effects, the clever ways that you can make things happen. But I suppose for this, the authenticity, particularly of those training scenes, would have been quite important to you.
Oh, absolutely. I wanted it to feel as real as possible and did not want to have any use of any CGI with the hawks at all. So Claire did everything for real. She underwent some falconry training, and as Helen said, she was a complete natural at it. Thank you, Claire. And we wanted to make it feel real and very present and very urgent and super authentic. And we also had the benefit of where I live in Bristol, of the Natural History Unit and all the amazing, skillful cameramen and people who live there. So we had a brilliant wildlife cameraman who helped us shoot those incredible shots in the film with Mabel flying.
And I should say, I'm going to butt in here, that one of the primary concern of all the filmmakers here was the welfare of the hawks. Were really very much the stars on set.
They were. It sounds like it. Philippa, you make and you have made is stories, really resonant stories of women. And I think it's interesting. I know something that, a point that you made about this is that the story, the narrative of daughters losing their fathers is it's such an important and special relationship, but it's not really explored.
That's very true. When my father died, not long before I was actually given Helen's amazing memoir to read, and it spoke to me in such a profound way, and I felt that it was such an important thing to show an adult relationship with a good father. We see so many dysfunctional male people on film and television. To show a good man and a good relationship between a father and an adult daughter was something very special, and that was very special to Brendan when he came on board to play Helen's father. He was very interested in showing what it is to be a good man.
Yeah, Brendan Gleeson, a wonderful actor, and again, Helen, for you to see him encapsulating that part must have been fascinating.
Oh, it was incredible, actually. He was physically very unlike my dad, but exactly like my dad. And I saw him getting out of a van on set, and there was this sort of, he's very, very tall, and he came out of the van, and he looked at me with this sort of crumpled worry in his face, and he basically sort of said, it must be very strange for you to see me dressed as your dad. And something about his face, I just realized how important this